Razabani for IFL TV, proudly sponsored by Everlast. I'm delighted to have with me today the man, the myth, the legend himself, Mr. Dan Rafael. Dan, how are we doing?
I'm doing great. I don't know if I'm a myth. I'm definitely a legend. No, just kidding.
How are things?
It's all good.
How are things stateside?
Stateside is good. Can't complain. Looking forward to an active fall schedule. It's been a brutal summer, as you know, with so many postponements and cancellations and fights that fell through and this and that. Just seemed like one after another. And now, knock on wood, hopefully the things that are set on the schedule will actually come off. And, you know, it does look like a pretty stacked fall schedule. So I'm pumped up for it.
Dan, I want to obviously start off with the big fight coming up in, 7 days away, 6 days away now. Anthony Joshua, the unified heavyweight champion of the world, returns against arguably one of the greatest cruiserweights of all time. People say top three, maybe definitely top two after Evander Holyfield in Alexander Usyk. How much of a threat is Usyk going to be to Anthony Joshua next week?
He's a threat, I think. You know, don't get me wrong. I still think Anthony Joshua, if you said, who are you picking to win the fight? I'm picking Anthony Joshua. But it's not the kind of fight where you pick because you think it's, you know, a squash match where you think he's going to just blow him away or, you know, completely dominate the fight. You know, Alexander Usyk is an all-time great cruiserweight, obviously. He was a great amateur. He and Anthony both won gold medals in the Olympics. So he's got a lot going for him. He's a very talented fighter. He's got a lot of skills. He's quick. He's a southpaw. He's very intelligent. You know, this is a guy with that. I know Anthony won the gold medal, but he didn't have that deep amateur background from the standpoint of having, you know, a couple hundred fights. Usually heavyweights don't have that many fights in the amateurs. Alexander Usyk had a tremendous number of amateur fights and had that great foundation, learning, you know, from the coaches of the Ukrainian national team, including Vasily Lomachenko's father, Anatoly Lomachenko, a great trainer. He's got a good team behind him, you know, and he's hungry and he's skilled and he's not afraid. You know, the last guy in the world that's going to be worried about fighting in front of a big crowd on the other guy's home turf in London is going to be Alexander Usyk. If you look at his track record of all of his championship fights in the cruiserweight division, he won his title on the road in the backyard of his home of his opponent. He fought defenses in the United States. He fought defenses in the World Boxing Super Series. He unified titles in Russia. He came and fought in defense of the titles against Bellew in the UK. So he's fought all of his big fights pretty much on the road. So going to the UK is not going to be any big thing for him. Probably happy to be back in London, which is where he won the Olympic gold medal. But all that said, as a heavyweight, he's only had the 2 fights. He's had some injuries. Obviously, the pandemic slowed down the schedule. So between the virus and the injuries, he's only had 2 matches in the heavyweight division. And I have to be honest, man, I didn't think he really looked all that good in those fights. He fought Chaz Witherspoon in the debut after having a biceps injury, you know, in a long layoff. You know, Chaz Witherspoon, even at his best, was like a fringe contender, and now it's much more past those days. And yes, he got the knockout, got the stoppage, you know, stopped it in the corner. But, you know, I didn't think he looked good in that fight, to be honest. And I don't think anybody did. I don't think even Usyk thought he looked good in that fight. And then what was the next fight? The next fight was the Chisora fight. You know, he won. It was a pretty good fight. It was a lot closer, I think, than a lot of people anticipated. And so based on his track record as just a professional, he's a tremendous fighter, pound for pound level. Was on a lot of people's pound for pound list until the long layoffs. But in the heavyweight division, it's been a little lackluster. So my question is, frankly, which guy shows up? Is it the guy we've seen sort of with 2 middling heavyweight wins, or is it the guy that was just a dominating figure in the cruiserweight division? You know, if it's the dominating guy from cruiserweight that can do that in heavyweight, you know, he's going to give Anthony Joshua a lot of trouble. If it's the guy that was middling against Chisora and against Chaz Witherspoon, Anthony Joshua should take care of him. But again, I think it's going to take a little time, a few rounds to figure him out because of the skill set and the lateral movement and the speed that Usyk possesses. That it will take Joshua, you know, a little bit of time to kind of figure that out and get the rhythm. But by the time that fight, unless he lands a big bomb early on and gets him out of there, you know, I suspect the fight's going to go pretty deep. And I think the deeper it goes, probably the better it is for Joshua. start breaking them down, getting closer, and unleashing some of those big punches.
A lot of people talk about Anthony Joshua's kind of advantages. Obviously, he's got that reach advantage, but he had a significantly longer reach against Andy Ruiz in the first fight. They talk about power and Anthony Joshua's power, but they also say that Gassiev was a big puncher, and pound for pound outside of Wilder could be one of the biggest punches in boxing, full stop. So we've seen the latest pictures of Anthony Joshua slimming down it, and it kind of almost portrays that he might try to box Alexander-Usyk. But if Anthony Joshua does what he did against maybe the Joseph Parker fight or the Andy Ruiz 2 fight, would he need to be a lot better because Alexander is far better boxer than Parker and Ruiz too?
If they're going to go the boxing route, then I would agree with that. They're going to have to really be, at his absolute best, because like you said, as a pure boxer, Alexander-Usyk, blows the doors off of guys like Joe Parker and Andy Ruiz, just for the pure technical ability, the quickness. Again, I have huge respect, and I've always said this, for Robert McCracken as a trainer. I thought he did a phenomenal job in putting the game plan in for how they went about fighting the rematch against Andy Ruiz. Robert McCracken is no joke as a trainer. He was a good boxer when he was a pro and a good contender. He's even better a trainer, in my opinion, than he was as a professional fighter. So I'm sure that they have their game plan. I know that Anthony Joshua has a lot of respect and understands that Rob is the right guy for him. If they try to box with the boxer, I mean, I'd be maybe a little bit surprised, as opposed to going in there and try to impose himself on the smaller guy. But we've seen that happen before. I think a lot of people thought, in the case of the rematch between Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder, that because Fury had success boxing against Deontay in the first fight and ended up with the draw, that he would, feeling maybe that they got the raw deal on the draw, that they would still box against him in the rematch and try to win that way. But they didn't do that. They went right after him, like Tyson Fury was this big slugger, and they bombed him out of there. So maybe they have that sort of mindset where, instead of trying to go and bomb him out, we're going to turn the tables. We're going to box with the boxer, and we're going to do a better job, and we're going to outpoint him. I'm sure they've looked at the videos, and I'll defer to McCracken if that's in fact what their game plan is. Like I said, all the respect in the world for McCracken. He's a great strategist, and Joshua not only trusts him, but he listens to him. He doesn't. It's one thing for a coach to tell you what you need to do and put the right game plan in place, but the athlete has to go out there and execute that game plan. And so far, Joshua has been able to execute the perfect game plans that Rob's come up with.
And 2 weeks after, you just mentioned that they're Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury, you get it on for the 3rd time. Is this do or die for Deontay?
I don't like to get that dramatic, but obviously it's an important victory if he can get it, and it'll be a devastating loss if he loses again. But at the end of the day, if he does in fact lose, his losses will have been to the same guy, and he's beaten everybody else. So some guys just have the other guy's number. We've seen that throughout the course of boxing history. It happens. But it's not like if he loses that I think Deontay Wilder has to retire. But certainly if he loses, it's a huge hit on his career, on his earning power, on his legacy, for sure. I mean, this is, again, I don't like to get too dramatic. I don't want to get too caught up in the moment, but I'd be less than honest if I didn't say this was, well, I don't call it a do or die. It's like a must win. You gotta get back in this one. You got to do your thing. And even if you lose, you got to make it competitive. You can't just get blown away like you did in the rematch.
And then, the old phrase in boxing, one punch can change everything. In 2019, we were looking forward to a potentially Deontay Wilder, Anthony Joshua undisputed fight. Anthony Joshua then takes that loss to Ruiz. That fight is now out of the window. Then we're looking forward to Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury, an undisputed fight. It falls through because of the arbitration and Wilder has to fight Fury. Would you be surprised at all if October the 10th, we're looking at Alexander-Usyk, the unified heavyweight champion of the world, and Wilder, the WBC champ? And we're now talking about Wilder-Usyk. I know Anthony Joshua has a rematch, but tables can change so quickly.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the what's the old saying also in boxing? Fights make fights. That you don't know until the match is over till what's next. I think unfortunately in our sport, a lot of people are constantly or only looking ahead. And let's enjoy the 2 fights we have in front of us. It may not be the fight that we all wanted, which was the undisputed fight between Fury and Joshua. Okay, we didn't get that, but we've got 2 pretty darn good fights in the schedule before that can happen. Wilder and Fury 3 is still an intriguing fight for a lot of reasons. Joshua against Usyk is a very intriguing fight for a lot of reasons. So I'm going to enjoy those two fights before I start to worry about, what happens after that. But, if we woke up on October 10th or late night, October 9th, and it happened to be that it was the prospect of an Usyk against Wilder fight, it wouldn't be a total shock. I mean, I'd be kind of surprised if both of the underdogs won, but look, crazier stuff's happened. I suspect, though, that, at least one of the favorites is going to win. And, they're favorites for a reason. So you'd think that probably both favorites would win. But it's not a bad thing if there's an upset. Upsets, create excitement. They get people engaged. They're interesting. It opens up the possibilities for other fights. So you just have to see what happens. But it's not a bad problem to have if any of the permutations of the winners or losers of those fights were to match up with each other. But, of course, I think that the most fans, without disrespecting Usyk or Wilder, hope to see Fury victorious, hope to see AJ victorious, and that they finally meet for the undisputed title.
Another man waiting in the background has been waiting for that kind of WBC shot is Dillian Whyte. Rumors where he was going to fight Chris Arreola. It's not Chris Arreola. It's actually probably an even tougher opponent in Whyte-Wallin. I spoke to Otto 2 days ago, and he's super excited. And he's saying, I'm going to be a big, big problem for Dillian Whyte. People remember Otto here in the UK for Fury, but he's gone on to have some great victories. Most recently, obviously, Dominic Brazil, unanimous victory as well. A tough fight for Dillian?
Oh, definitely. I think it's definitely a tough fight. And in my opinion, a tougher fight than Arreola, but a totally different fight than Arreola. If it was Arreola, it would have just been whoever can land the big shot. It's going to be a slugfest. They're going to stand and trade. Whyte-Wallin brings a little bit more nuance to his game. He can box. He can brawl a little bit. He doesn't have spectacular power, but he can hurt you. He's younger. He's fresher than Arreola. He's a good heavyweight. I mean, there's no doubt. And Tyson Fury will be the first to tell you that. He gave Tyson Fury a lot of problems, even besides just the terrible cuts that he opened up on Fury. And if you look at the scorecards, yes, they were wide in favor of Fury, but I was at that fight. Sometimes it's lost on people. You can have, if you look at the scorecards, you see a fight that's 118 to 110. Oh, easy win for the guy. But round by round, it's competitive. It's just that the other guy is winning each of those rounds. That's what Whyte-Wallin against Tyson Fury was like. Yes, Tyson Fury rightfully was the wide winner on the scorecards, but each individual 3-minute session was hell. It was a tough fight for both guys. And Whyte-Wallin made a bigger name for himself in that defeat than he had in any of his previous victories. Like you said, he's a good heavyweight. He beat Brazil. He had a good win against Travis Kaufman, who's maybe not at the championship level, but he's a tough out for anybody. Those are the 2 wins that he has had since the Tyson Fury fight. And I give credit to Otto and his team for taking that fight. I certainly give credit to the Dillian Whyte team for taking a tough fight when they didn't have to do so. I'm glad to see that Eddie Hearn made that matchup. It's an attractive fight. Again, it's not maybe the A+ fight you'd like to see him in a title fight or something like that, but it's a pretty darn good fight. I'm looking forward to that. I'm a fan of watching Dillian Whyte fights. I like Dillian Whyte on a personal level. He's a cool guy. And Otto is a cool guy also. I mean, I don't know him well, but I've gotten to know him a little bit, interviewed him several times because of the main 3 fights he's had between Fury, Brazil, and the Travis Kaufman fight. A hungry guy, wants to become the first heavyweight champion from his country of Sweden. And, I'm bringing it on. I'm excited for it.
Dan, let's talk a little bit about DAZN and the USA. Eddie Hearn hasn't had a show in the States. Well, I know he's announced one, which next month, which we'll come to, but it's going to be almost 5 months until the last show that he had in the States. Why have we waited so long, or rather you guys waited so long for a show with DAZN and Eddie Hearn to take place in America?
Well, to the best of my recollection, the last American show that Matchroom did was the Devin Haney, Jorge Linares fight, which was right at the very end of May. So again, if my recollection serves me correct, it was always sort of in the plans that for different reasons, pandemic related and otherwise, plus the rev up of Fight Camp in the UK for several weeks in a row, that they were never going to have an American-based show in the month of June or in the month of July. I don't like that. I think that's still, not the greatest planning. If you're a subscription service, you want to service the people. You want to, not only do you want to attract new subscribers, but you want to retain the current ones that you have. And I feel like you need to give something to those fans that are going to be most interested every month. And not to knock the fight camp shows, but they didn't really mean anything to the American fans. And, you know, there just wasn't any matchroom fights for those few months. But they were supposed to have an event in August. For different reasons, that did not happen. Same thing with September. And now they were looking at something in early October, plus October 16th. That didn't happen. October 16th was supposed to be the Chocolatito Gonzalez, Juan Francisco Estrada third fight. And they were supposed to have another fight probably with Mikey Garcia on October 2nd. But when Chocolatito came down with COVID, that obviously was out the window. So they moved the Mikey fight to the 16th. So you're going to go from the end of May, meaning nothing in June, nothing in July, nothing in August, nothing in September, and then nothing until midway into the month of October for an American fight. I think it's a poor strategy from DAZN. I can't blame Matchroom for it because, you know, at the end of the day, they're still the seller of the content, and it's really up to DAZN, you know, how much they're going to open up the purse strings and make the schedule. So I'm sure Eddie was kind of pushing for some more dates in America. But the reality also is this, that DAZN, for all the gigantic hype that they came to the table with when they first revved up, they've also made it very clear that the United States is being downgraded in terms of how important it is to their business. They've expanded into some 200 markets around the world, including the UK, and they've made those places other than America more of a priority. Even though at the end of the day, I feel like still the revenue is still bigger here than in most other places. They have their plans and what they want to do, and it does not include, I guess, as much of an emphasis on the United States market. It's unfortunate. They're still going to have some shows. Obviously, Eddie's still going to do some shows between now and the end of the year, and, you know, hopefully going forward. You know, Golden Boy is still supposed to deliver at least a few more shows. Their contract with DAZN is coming due. I don't know when their next show exactly is going to be, but they're planning for some shows. How many more? That's up in the air. You know, I feel like if they're going to downgrade their commitment to this marketplace, and there's going to be fewer Matchroom American shows, they would behoove them, in my opinion, to extend their deal with Golden Boy, you know, for a certain number of shows, because Golden Boy may not have the deepest stable in boxing, but they still have a lot of quality fighters, whether it's Ryan Garcia or it's Virgil Ortiz or you know, they've got other guys also that they work with, Jojo Diaz. I mean, they've got some nice fights that they can make. They've got a number of quality prospects. So, you know, I don't know what's going to happen with that, but it is disappointing to have such a long stretch without the US based shows. But that said, if you're a DAZN subscriber and you're a diehard, you are getting content from other places that's enjoyable. I mean, you know, the Eddie cards that are taking place in the UK are just fine. You know, I watched the Matchroom cards that were in, you know, you got to be diehard for it, but you know, I am a diehard. So I watched the card they did from Spain with Leharaga, which was a hell of a fight, you know, a couple of weeks ago. And then I watched, you know, Filip Hrgovic in a fight. Granted, it was a mismatch, but the rest of the show, you know, was not bad. But, you know, I consider that to be like, you know, that's like the dessert. That's like sort of the appetizer. I need the meat and potatoes. I need the main course, you know?
Don't we all, Dan?
Yeah.
Dan, a fighter that they...
I love a main course, man. I love a main course.
Times two. Dan, a fighter that obviously was on DAZN quite recently was obviously Salah versus Canelo, who's now obviously going to fight Caleb Plant. It's been announced it's going to be on Showtime, so it's not going to be on Fox. And to the best of my knowledge, I don't think Plant has ever fought on Showtime. So what's the future of Fox and Showtime now? Where is it heading?
Well, that fight appears to be headed to Showtime. I don't think it's been officially announced yet, but it feels that way, and it's felt that way for a while. The fact that when they announced the fight to begin with, that they never identified the broadcaster, and Fox's deal with PBC is coming to a conclusion also. Now, Fox retains the right to an option year. I don't think they have decided one way or the other whether they're going to extend that for that 1 year. Even if they do pick it up for the year, it still sort of makes them a lame duck. I think that PBC and Al Heyman know that in terms of the rights fees that are being paid, Showtime is still paying more money. And if you look at the calendar, if you take the pay-per-view fights away from the calendar, and I'm talking about the fights that are either on your main subscription platform, which is Showtime, not Showtime pay-per-view, and your main fights are on Fox or Fox Sports 1, not the pay-per-views. The reality is that the Showtime schedule is better and has been for a while. Why? Because there's a little bit more quality control there. They insist on a certain level, and so they've been getting a little bit better of fights. Maybe I've looked at it like this: Showtime may not be getting the biggest names, but they're getting the best matchup, whereas Fox sometimes get the better names, but in the more mismatch kind of fights, yeah, Showtime has some names also. They've been doing Gervonta Davis fights, for example. So it's not like they're bereft of the top names, but it still follows sort of the scenario that I just laid out. So now you have Canelo apparently having his pay-per-view fight with Caleb Plant on Showtime pay-per-view. And again, nothing against Caleb Plant. That's not about Caleb Plant. It's about Canelo Alvarez. I mean, they're gonna do a good job of marketing the fight and promoting it like they've always done. I think one of the things people forget is that even though Fox in the United States is a terrestrial station, that you can get it anywhere, even if you don't have a satellite service or a cable service. You just plug your TV in the wall and you put up your rabbit ears, and you're going to get the channel. But Showtime has a lot of people that subscribe for boxing. They have deep experience in dealing with pay-per-views. They are owned by CBS Corporation, which is another terrestrial station. If they can get them involved somehow in the marketing of this event, that would give them a similar platform the way Fox has their main network. And the reality is also, people I think forget that some of the biggest fights that Canelo Alvarez has been involved in his career were Showtime pay-per-view events. His fight, for example, with Floyd Mayweather was a Showtime pay-per-view event. At the time, I believe it was like the second highest grossing fight in the history of boxing. It's been surpassed. But he did, I don't know, 3 or 4 pay-per-view fights that did pretty decent business on Showtime. Not even including the Floyd fight when he fought Arislandi Lara. That's a Showtime pay-per-view fight. When he fought Alfredo Angulo, that was a Showtime pay-per-view fight. He fought live on Showtime against Josecito Lopez before he moved on to pay-per-view. So he has relationships and experience with the people at Showtime, because it's still the same group of executives and hierarchy that were there back, a number of years ago when he first went on pay-per-view. So, and also I think it probably came down to if you're PBC, which one of my broadcast partners, Showtime or Fox, is going to give me the highest guarantee. I believe that Showtime, if it's going to in fact be on Showtime pay-per-view, they came through with the best deal, because at the end of the day, it's a business.
Now, let's talk a little bit about promoter network rivalries. Obviously, we thought Crawford and Porter wasn't going to be made. It went per bid. It got delayed. I know Eddie Hearn mentioned he was going to bid. You never know. Triller might have bidded as well for that particular fight. Were you surprised that a deal was finally reached and for it to take place, more importantly, on ESPN as well?
Not totally surprised. First of all, I do think that Matchroom was going to bid. By my understanding from talking to folks that were on the ground in Puerto Rico preparing for the purse bid, that Matchroom Boxing did have a representative there, kind of, there to see things. Now, that doesn't mean they would have showed up at the purse bid and actually made a bid, but they were prepared to bid if necessary, and this is my understanding. I'm happy that they made a deal. It didn't totally shock me. It seemed like it was too, I don't want to say easy, but there was really no reason not to make a deal. And if you take a look at the landscape from the PBC point of view, they're on the hook for a large amount of money as it relates to their half of the promotion, or their 40% of the promotion for the Fury Wilder 3. They're on the hook for a tremendous amount of money between Canelo Alvarez and Caleb Plant, something on the order of $50 million just for the main event, not even including whatever other bouts they put on the show and all the other expenses that go along with mounting such a big fight. Did they want to take on the burden of another fight that's like about a main event that's about a $10 million main event, again, not including the rest of the show and the other expenses? So I think they sort of were like, look, if you bring us the right deal, we'll do what they call the provision of services, where we'll turn over, we're going to have our involvement. They'll have their signage and whatever, but Top Rank's going to run the event. They're going to handle the undercard. They're going to handle, the distribution. It's their broadcast partner. Didn't totally shock me. Sean Porter and his team, they got a good deal. And he still has every opportunity to win. And one thing about it is, Top Rank, they're pros, just like PBC, they're pros. It's not like they're going to treat him badly. He's going to get the same, proper treatment that a top level fighter should receive. There's not gonna be any funny games. You don't have to worry about how he's going to get there. He lives in Las Vegas, so he can get in the car and drive 15 minutes to the state, to the arena. They're gonna act professionally. They'll treat Sean Porter with all the respect that he and his team warrant, and they'll put on a good fight, and it'll just be on ESPN and not involving Fox or Showtime. So, it made sense to make a deal, in my opinion. And look, I'm thrilled, because if we couldn't get Terrence Crawford against Errol Spence, the fight that so many people wanted for a while, and now who knows what's up with that. Crawford certainly could lose to Sean Porter. Errol Spence is sidelined at the moment because of the eye surgery. unsure when he'll be back or if he'll be back. Hopefully he will be. But we have ourselves another tremendous matchup for the fall schedule. I mean, Crawford-Porter is about as good as you can make in that weight class and one of the better fights you can make in the whole sport. And I think it's going to be a great fight.
Dan, I'll end on this. As you like to call them, wretched WBA are transitioning.
I've toned it down a little bit. I've toned it down a little bit because they're doing the right thing right now.
They are in the midst of doing the right thing. Who's wretched more? Is it the WBA or the WBC?
I mean, it's still the WBA. I mean, I don't really have a lot of grievance with the WBC at the moment. I mean, I do have a few issues here and there. Like, you're never going to agree on everything. But the WBA, you know, for 15 years has been horrendous. And the level of their horrendousness got worse and worse and worse and worse until it finally, you know, exploded after that horrendous decision in the Michael Fox Maestri fight for the nonsense interim title that was not necessary, and that crazy, horrible judging. And everybody came out on them, including the ABC, which threatened to have their commissions and tribal commissions not sanction their events, which would essentially put them out of business. They're not doing what they're doing just because they're nice guys or because they feel like it's the right thing to do. They're doing what they're doing because they were scared straight, because they saw their business about to be ruined and out of business if they kept up with the crap that they've been doing. But to their credit, they understood that, and they've definitely changed their ways. I feel like it was a very big deal for them to bring in an experienced, no-nonsense guy like Gary Shaw, a longtime promoter who was basically in retirement. You know, he has experience on the regulator part of the business as a person that was involved with the New Jersey Commission for many years, and as a promoter, both with Main Events for a long time and then on his own. You know, at one time or another, Gary Shaw promoted Lennox Lewis, Manny Pacquiao, Shane Mosley, Winky Wright, Jeff Lacey, guys like that. All guys when they were at their best, you know, or in their some of their top fights. Was also involved in you know, in the MMA world for a while. Has deep associations with the organizations and with Showtime and HBO back when HBO was still in the business. My point is, the WBA brought in a seasoned veteran, no bullshit boxing guy, and made him the chief of staff and basically put him in charge of trying to go through this process. And Gary, you know, for better or for worse, love him or hate him, you know, he's going to do that. He's going to kick them in the butter. He's not going to work there, in my opinion. I talked to Gary about this extensively over the last couple of weeks, and they are doing the right thing. And, you know, Gary's overseeing that, and they're following through. I mean, you can moan and hate what they have done for 15 years, but you have to give them some credit and respect for doing what they're doing now, which is the right thing for whatever the reason is. You know, it's business related as far as I'm concerned, but at the end of the day, they stripped all the interim champions. So that was right off the bat. You went down 11 guys with fake belts, and they put those fighters in the mandatory positions or ordered them into eliminators. And they've already ordered or scheduled a number of purse bids or fights that involve those former interim champions against the regular champions. And they'll take place over the course of the next number of months. And when that is squared away, you hope that they'll continue to follow through and order the regular champions to fight their super champions. And someday, you know, in the next year or so, we can reach a moment in time where I can look at my champions list that I keep for all the organizations, and I can count them up, and there'll be 17 champions for the WBA. What a concept, one per weight class. And, you know, if there's an interim champion here and there for, you know, a significant business reason, I'm a reasonable individual. I get that. Sometimes you have to do that to help facilitate the biggest fight possible. And by the same token, if there's a reasonable need for an interim champion, because in the case of an injury, which is the reason why you should use an interim champion, that's the reason that the IBF uses interim champions, is literally only in the case of an injury to the champion that's going to keep that boxer out for, you know, some period of time, and they make an interim title available. So far, so good. If you look down the list of the sanctioning bodies, to my recollection at this exact moment in time, the IBF has no interim champions or some superficial second-tier title holder. In the case of the WBO, they have one interim champion in the 130-pound division. That is Shakur Stevenson. That will be a title that is eliminated once he and Jamel Herring have their title fight on October 23rd. That interim title was put in as a business situation to allow Stevenson to not stop the fight between Herring and Frampton. I was okay with that. And now they're going to fight, as it should be. The WBC, to the best of my recollection, currently has 4 interim champions. One of them is strictly because of injury. I believe in the 115-pound weight class. And then there's a couple others that hopefully they can get rid of them over the coming months. They still have the problematic franchise champion, which I have arguments with Mauricio Suleiman in a respectful way on a regular basis. And then there's the WBA, which had 11 interim champions and a whole bunch of regular champions. So, they're still the worst. But let's see if they can, get rid of all these extraneous titles and do the right thing.
Dan, I could probably carry on with you, but I know Zoom's going to give me a notification to say your 40 minutes is nearly up. And unfortunately, we spoke off camera for a little while as well. So I appreciate you jumping on and giving me a little bit of your time and knowledge today. And I'm sure in the next couple of weeks, the heavyweight division could be turned upside down, and we'll have to do.
Hey, are you coming out to the Fury Wilder fight in Vegas?
When they're not providing at the moment waivers and visas to anyone in the UK. So one of our guys, Andy, who's been covering all the events over the last kind of 18 months, is the only one that can go out there and cover the fights. Normally we'll send two to those kind of events. Yeah. So,
well, I'm sure I'll see Andy out there, but we'll miss you out there.
Yeah, definitely. Dan Rafael, IFL TV, thank you very much.
My pleasure.